Hello everyone, this is Remlace from 40k Theories, and welcome to the May edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. As always, if you want your questions answered, click the link in the video description and help support the channel by becoming a patron. Now let's jump into these questions. The Stabby Brit asks, why do you think that female Space Marines receive such a unique amount of hatred and criticism, especially when equally non-canon ideas or conversions are more widely accepted? Ultimately, this one boils down to the individual who has a problem with it in fanon. I know that female Space Marines are an incredibly hot-button topic in the canon side of things, but in the fanon side of things, where you just basically make your own shit up, like people making, say, Space Skaven armies, or Space Lizard Men, or Genestealer Cult Space Marines, for example. I don't understand why people have an issue in that side of things, considering there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but I suppose with some people it would be down to the fact that a few individuals, not everyone, but a few individuals will be against anything that deviates from the canon, even though this is purely fanon. I mean, I can understand from the canon side of things why people have such an issue, but from the fanon side of things, I have no idea, to be brutally honest with you. Wolf of England asks, given we know time flies differently in the warp, if we take the Doppler effect into account, combined with the theory of relativity, is it safe to assume that somewhere within the warp, there is a point in time in which Ego Queen Alexis has succumbed to Magnus's advances? Oh yeah, absolutely. Brent Feast asks, can you sustain that Hive Tyrant voice for a decent amount of time without hurting your throat? And what other voices can you do without hurting yourself? I can sustain it for a decent amount of time, I won't do so here. In regards to other voices, I've been told I do a half-decent impression of Gollum from Lord of the Rings. I'm also doing an impression of it now, might I? He steals it from us. He steals it from us. My precious. Gollum. Yeah, that was pretty bad. I don't care. Luke Welsh asks, do you think that the Emperor wanted something like the Horus Heresy to happen to see which of his sons were truly loyal? I mean, given events that happened in Malcador's audio drama, it seems that they wanted to kill off most of the Primarchs at the very least following the Great Crusade, so it's possible that something like the Heresy might have been orchestrated just so those ones who were deemed quote-unquote useless would have been killed off. It didn't matter so much whether these Primarchs were loyal, it's more a point of whether these Primarchs were useful. Felix Argyle asks, how do you like knowing the fact that your name 40k Theories means you need to do 40,000 theories in total? Ha, Felix. He also goes on to ask, is there a 40k version of the Kama Sutra? Probably. I don't know. It will depend on the various worlds. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some worlds that will have their own versions of the Kama Sutra. What? Why? Brent Feast asks, between your ship having the demon holding pen, the infamous Felix room, and somehow housing an entire Necron tomb world, how much of your ship is solely dedicated to hoarding and storing heresy? For clarification purposes, Brent is referring to the Patreon exclusive Discord server, where if you pledge $2 or more a month, you have access to the 40k Theories Patreon Discord server, which has a bunch of crazy stuff in it, to be honest. Again, link in the video description to the Patreon page. In regards to Brent's question, it's an inquisitorial vessel. A lot of it's going to be dedicated to storing and researching heresy. Evangeline Coudrain asks, is anime still a thing in 40k? I know that citizens can watch some kind of TV on certain occasions, so do they broadcast anime to brainwash them as well? Maybe on some worlds. sure, why not? I know some worlds have literally only one television station, and it's the equivalent of the Gospel Channel. The novel Lord of Night actually has a scene where there's a television station on this particular hive world that is dedicated purely for prayers to the Emperor. And the Night Lord hijacks the TV station, butchers the preacher, and has people film the corpse. I say people, it's camera servitors, but point's still the same. It's quite amusing in that book. Zero Hits asks, is it possible that a pre-Age of Strife human exploration or colony ship was sent outside the galaxy to a neighbouring one before the fall? I mean, it's theoretically possible that one colony ship could have gone outside the galaxy, but whether that was out of intention or accident is a different matter altogether. The problem is, given how long, even with warp travel, it takes to travel from one end of the galaxy to the other, and given the distances between galaxies, there's always the possibility that these colonists could have potentially died en route while they were travelling to another galaxy. I wouldn't rule it out. If they did travel to another galaxy, I do believe it would be more of a case of it being a mistake rather than intended. Warrior of Virtue asks, is it possible for the Chaos Gods to physically manifest in the material universe? Yes, Malice has already done so in the Heroes of the Space Marine anthology. He also asks, do you think the Old Ones could return, and if so, how would they react to the current state of the galaxy? I'm gonna say no. The reason for this is that the majority of them were rendered extinct during the War in Heaven. And if the Umbra are part of one of the Old Ones, the lingering god Ka, then what seems to suggest that the Old Ones who survived had evolved to a higher plane of existence to become gods. So if they're going to be bound into the warp, unless someone's trying to actively summon the Old Ones, I don't think they will ever return. Brent Feast asks, when coming up with lore for a homebrew Chaos Warband, what is a good baseline to use for the average warband strength and access to resources? It would depend on how you write your fluff, like, is this warband deserters from a Space Marine chapter, for example? If so, you could probably get away with using the standard Codex company structure and say that a company of this particular chapter fell to chaos and became renegades, or something to that effect. Mace Craze, Tempest of the Imperial Fists, great name, asks, do the Chaos Gods dictate their respective emotions being elicited in the populations of man? In regards to people and emotions and the gods, yes, the gods were born of emotions and feelings and all other, wibbly wobbly warp stuff. But emotions are not exclusive to individuals with souls. The novel Watchers of the Throne clearly shows a Sister of Silence showing anger. Anger is an emotion, but they have no souls. So they don't dictate the emotions in humanity per se, but if you're exposed to a high concentration of energy linked to that particular god, then those emotions would swell to the surface. Is it true that Rabute Guilliman stands among men as of 8th edition? Yes, Guilliman has returned. He is the only Primarch to have returned so far, amongst the Loyalists, that is, before anyone points out the Demon Primarchs. How opposed would the Emperor or Rabute Guilliman be to an alliance or possible integration with the Eldar? Well, in regards to Guilliman, he technically already does. He has an alliance with the Inari, which is the newest sect dedicated to the worship of the god Iniad, the god of the dead. Because it was them who brought Guilliman back, they're actually on surprisingly good terms with the Imperium. I'm not sure if it's an alliance per se or whether it's just a non-aggression pact, but they're on good terms at the very least, so a full-blown alliance is certainly possible. He also asks at what point does augmentation stop for tech priests? Until they're a brain in a jar, essentially. Cayman Astartes asks, if the Imperium comes across a technologically advanced human civilization that is willing to be absorbed into the Imperium, how does the Imperium go about it? The Imperium would send in the Mechanicus to study the technology, look for STCs and take them back to Mars if they got any, make sure there's no AIs, if there are, destroy them, and that would be that, essentially, as far as I can tell. If a Perpetual were to donate large quantities of blood to save a friend or a soldier of the same blood type, would that patient begin to become a Perpetual? I have no idea. There's so much about the whole nature of Perpetuals that we still don't know. We don't know if the perpetuality is tied to their biology or if it's something more psychically induced. Cayman also asks, you are the Chaos Lord of a Night Lord's warband, what are your goals and desires for not only you and your brothers but the galaxy as a whole? Scare people, kill them, take their shit, move on. LeonBoss919 asks, is it possible for Magnus to out-scheme Tzeentch? I sincerely doubt it. Mace Craze, Tempest of the Imperial Fists asks, another question that has raged within me for a while now, upon their deaths do traitor Space Marines get banished back to the warp as their demon counterparts do, or are they killed upon destruction? When a Chaos Space Marine dies, if they're a standard Chaos Space Marine, you shoot them, they die, they fall down dead, that's it. There's no fireworks, no magical space dust. If it's a demon prince, they'll be banished back to the warp. If it's a possessed, the demon would be banished back to the warp, but the host body would still remain as far as I'm aware. And finally, Austin Horner asks, in Burning of Prospero, there is a demon who is able to perfectly shapeshift into others, taking on the forms of Horus, Amon, and a long-dead friend of the protagonist, as well as possessing a great deal of psychic strength. Has this demon ever resurfaced since his defeat at the hands of the wolves? As far as I'm aware, I don't think he has, but he might have done. It has been a few years since I read that book, so off the top of my head, I'm going to say no. And that concludes this edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. As always, if you wish to help the channel and become a patron, click the link in the video description. Until next time, this has been Remlace from 40k Theories, and we'll see you again soon.